Today, we'll be visiting the Palm Springs locations connected to William Holden. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us here at Traces of Hollywood. Today we'll be visiting the residences and other locations and properties around Palm Springs that are connected to William Holden. Of course, William Holden was one of the stars of Sunset Boulevard, along with Gloria Swanson, and maybe you saw the Gloria Swanson in Palm Springs video I did previously. Check that out if you haven't seen it yet. So getting back to William Holden, our first stop is here in the Deepwell neighborhood, which is south of downtown Palm Springs. And Palm Springs is a pretty small town, off-season about 30,000 people, I believe. And during the peak season, which is winter here, it can grow to about 10 times that, to 300,000 folks. But it's a small town, even geographically, so you can get from one end of town to the other in about 15 minutes. So again, this is on the south side, and I will be putting the addresses in the description. But here's a home that Holden lived in from 1967 to 1977. And this is at 1323 South Driftwood Drive. Again, I'll put the addresses in the description so you guys can come visit as well if you're ever in Palm Springs. And this home he lived in during the filming of the movie Network. That film came out in 1976, and again, he lived here until 1977. And in the film, Holden played the news division president, Max Schumacher. And you might remember Peter Finch for his famous line, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take this anymore." But an excellent film. You should definitely check it out. So the South Driftwood Drive property here is pretty substantial. 4,400 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 4 baths, and it's actually comprised of 4 different lots that were combined into a huge property. It's a little over 42,000 square feet for the grounds itself. One thing I always find interesting is a lot of these stars bought homes in Palm Springs to use as a weekend getaway or a winter getaway, and a lot of them aren't very big. They're fairly modest, not necessarily very impressive, but this place is definitely the home of a celebrity. And because this property is so large, there is a main street on either side. It's the full width of the block. So this is one of the back gates on the back side. A large shrub or hedgerow, I guess, conceals the property. As we move on to the next home that he lived in, which he bought from his success in being the leading man in 74 films, but this one is up in the Southridge neighborhood. It's 2433 Southridge Drive, and do not expect to be able to see it any closer than this. Here's a photo I took a few months prior to shooting the video, but I love how cinematic it is with the full moon, and to me, it seems to very much fit his film star status. Holden moved into the Southridge home in 1977, and that was while he was filming Omen II, the sequel to The Omen, which came out in 1978. And he lived in this property with his wife, Stephanie Powers, and they would ride motorcycles down in the desert, and he had a pet python named Bertie. And I mentioned not expecting to see this any closer because you might recall that Southridge is a gated community. I discussed it in the Suzanne Summers video that I did. That's where her final home was, where she died, but it's also where the Bob Hope house is, the Lautner house from Diamonds Are Forever, the Steve McQueen house, and it's heavily guarded, heavily protected. But one interesting thing, as we drive through this neighborhood down below, you can see the relationship of this house compared to another home that is connected to William Holden. And as we approach this next address at 2390 South Araby Drive, you'll notice tucked behind these gates, we can see some of the property, but most of it is, again, tucked away. So this is the best view we can get from the street, and it's a dead-end street as well. But this is where Scott Holden lived, and he's the youngest son of William Holden and lived in this residence until 1993. Here we are approaching from the other direction, primarily the garage and what looks to be maybe a casita, a guest house of some sort, and the main house is further back. Here again, you can see the relationship from this property to his father's home. Here's a map view of Scott Holden's house. It's on the right with a bright blue pool in the back there. And we will pan up to his father's house right here up on Southridge. And I think it's fun to imagine William Holden being a dad and doing dad things and peeking over the hedges down onto his son's property to make sure he's not getting into any trouble. And this next location is behind some gates in Seven Lakes, a private community. And this is where Holden's ex-wife, Brenda Marshall, lived. They were married for 30 years, and she lived here from 1973 until she died in the home in 1992. So thank you all for joining me on this tour for one of my favorite actors from one of my favorite films. And as I mentioned before, I used to live in Hollywood, and I lived near the original Sunset Boulevard mansion, which unfortunately was torn down a long time ago, but we'll visit those locations in a future video. As always, I appreciate you guys stopping by. If you could, hit that subscribe button because it will help the channel grow and I can keep making more videos for you all. I love taking you along on these tours with me. So see you on the next one.